All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Bourbon Showdown podcast. My name is Jesse Jones, and on the show today, we have Andrea Wilson, the Master of Maturation at Michters, baby. That's right. She is on the program. We are going to talk everything Michters. She has sent along some delicious samples that we're going to try and taste. It's a phenomenal talk. Her and I go long, like we go at the 2-hour mark. So buckle in, Sonny Jim, because we get this thing started today. She is such a smart lady, and I thoroughly enjoyed talking to her. It was just wonderful learning more about the brand, learning where the company came from, learning where she came from. It was just, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. We want to thank her for her time. We are not going to spend a lot of time up top today. I say that every time, and I spend a lot of time up top, regardless of saying that. But either way, it's a fun episode. Her and I hit it off right off the bat. We thoroughly thank her for her time, and we're going to get it started. If you would please go hit like and subscribe on all of the things, on YouTube, on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, on wherever you find us, Instagram. We appreciate that. We appreciate all the positive feedback that we're getting from you guys. And now, without further ado, we're going to start the show with Andrea Wilson from Michters on the Bourbon Showdown podcast. Let's start it up. Welcome to the show. Today we have Andrea Wilson from Michters. She is the Master of Maturation. I'm never sure if I'm saying that right. Is it Master of Maturation?
That is correct.
Perfect.
That is correct. We're maturing whiskey over here.
Beautiful. I'm always worried I'm going to put a D in it. And then all of a sudden I've got all these people mad at me for no reason. It's maturation, not maduration. So
that's correct.
We have Andrea here with us today. Very, very excited to have you on the show. I feel that the maturation, the time the whiskey spins in the barrel is such an important part of the... See, I told you I was going to mess up somewhere. It's an important part of the process, and it doesn't really get its due in terms of the public's imagination. So thank you for being with me today, and I look forward to learning more about how the whiskey gets its flavor from what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to be here. I enjoy talking with people, and I miss it terribly during this time of the pandemic. So this is the next best thing, to be able to talk and share, and this is exciting. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, most definitely. This is, and you're right, like with everything, we've been indoors for so long. It's just, I've thoroughly enjoyed being able to talk with whiskey aficionados such as yourself, and just sort of pick your brain and find out all of the good things that have led to the good juice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you'll learn very quickly. I'm a talker, so that won't be a problem.
Hooray! Zero problems with that. So first and foremost, you are at Michters right now. Could you maybe give us a little history of Michters? I mean, you'd have to be under a rock to have never heard of Michters, but just to cover our bases, a little bit about the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michters has a heritage that dates back to 1753. It was originally located in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania. It was originally known as Shank's, after John Shank, who was the first owner and distiller. Then it transitioned, went to Abraham Baumberger. So it became Baumberger's at that point. Ultimately closed during Prohibition, and then later was picked up in the 50s by a gentleman, Lou Foreman. And Lou Foreman actually was credited with renaming the brand after his two sons. He had a boy named Michael and he had a boy named Peter. So the merger of their two names became Michters. The company continued on and sadly closed in 1989 due to some financial problems. And that was the end of Michters. It was seemingly lost to history. And the Malioco family now owns the brand. We're privately held. We have no external investors. And they acquired the abandoned trademark in the 90s and began a process to resurrect and rebuild this brand. They actually used to distribute the brand, and so they had familiarity with Michters and thought it was a great brand. But they had to make one first decision, and that big decision was whether or not to resurrect the brand in Pennsylvania or Kentucky. And it was a difficult decision, because you can imagine if there's an old, dilapidated distillery in Pennsylvania, and that was the original home of the brand, why wouldn't you do it there? But Joe was being mentored by a gentleman, Richard Dick Newman, who ultimately became president and CEO of Austin Nichols Wild Turkey at that time. And he also ran Old Tailor and Old Crow. He had quite the bourbon resume himself. And he said to Joe, one of the most important things in this business is to surround yourself with people that will help you be successful. And that's not just the distillers and, the people responsible for barrels, et cetera, but it's also about all the other, not as exciting, but very, very critically important to the business, the people who are responsible for compliance and tax and financials and all these other things. And he said, Kentucky is known for Kentucky bourbon, and there are lots of great, talented people in Kentucky who understand this business. And also, Joe is very passionate about quality. So he wants to surround himself with people who have similar interests as him in terms of the passion for making great quality spirits. So he ultimately made the decision to resurrect the brand in Kentucky. We've been through 3 phases of operation. The first phase was literally Joe and Richard and some others, going around the landscape of Kentucky and selecting different barrels as potential purchases. And so they tasted, they ended up buying some barrels, and then they began the objective of bottling. And that was the first phase for them. But of course, obviously, if you return a product to market, you got to start thinking about, how am I laying down product to be aging for the future?
Right.
So then they moved into their second phase of operations, which was contract distilling with a great Kentucky distillery. And they did that for many years. And then the third phase of operations was really the full build out of our facility here in the Shively section of Louisville, Kentucky. It's about 10 minutes south of downtown Louisville. It's not open to the public, but that's our main manufacturing facility. So we have our distillery, we have one on-site barrel warehouse, our liquid processing, bottling operations here. And then we acquired our old pot stills from Pennsylvania, and then we actually installed those in our Fort Nelson distillery, which is located in downtown Louisville. That is the facility that is on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And then we also acquired land in Springfield, Kentucky. So it's about an hour and 20 minutes or so from Louisville. It is 145 acres, and that's where we're growing estate-grown grains. We have some state-of-the-art warehouses there, and that is serving as our future campus to continue to grow. Hopefully everybody will continue to buy Michters, and we'll keep growing. And so that's a little bit of the journey that we've been on as a team. So we're a little over 60 employees now, and we are growing very rapidly. It's very exciting, but you'll see throughout the discussion that we are very focused on quality, and some of the things that we do are not necessarily cost effective, but they're very meaningful in terms of the final product that we deliver.
Beautiful. I love the stills coming back from Pennsylvania. I like the full circle nature of that right there.
Well, we love it too. I mean, you can imagine for Dan McKee is our master distiller, an amazing individual, incredibly talented. And it's so nice when we're down at Fort Nelson and we're able to show off and talk about, the original heritage of the brand. Today, this is the new modern Michters, but, there is a beautiful heritage to this brand, and it's definitely, we want everyone to be aware of that and know of the heritage that ties to Pennsylvania.
Well, and what about your heritage? Where did you come from? You've been working in Segway. That's called a Segway. You've also been working in whiskey your entire career, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually, let's see, in 2003, I went to work for Diageo as a contract consultant, and I was doing work for them at their Weller property, where they were looking to bring back some of the old warehouses that weren't in use, and they wanted some modifications done, as well as some other projects that they had me doing. I did that for a couple of years. Ended up entering Diageo as a full-time employee in 2005. I worked for them as a warehouse manager, and if you get to know me, I'm just one of those people that nothing stops me. I just keep going, and I want to learn as much as I can. And I'm here, I'm there, I'm over there. I'm a bit of a busybody, learning everything that I can, and ultimately took on whiskey planning, and did some other things within the organization, worked on some big projects, ultimately moved into the role of overseeing North American distillation and maturation, which included products like George Dickel and Bullet, and even Crown Royal in Canada. And it was a very exciting time. I loved it. The last thing that I did, I was part of the team that took the Bullet Distillery project in Kentucky to the board of Diageo. And so they were kind enough, because I was part of that team. They did include me on the plaque that is on that distillery. So,
that's
awesome. I was
awesome.
grateful for that. So, there's a lot of great talent at Diageo, and a lot of people that I was able to learn from that have shaped who I am today, and I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. And I think that goes, you and I were talking earlier about just the nature of the whiskey business and how it's so refreshing to hear people just speak well of one another. Like you were there for a very long time. You enjoyed your experience there, and it shows. Like, you speak well of them. It's just great to see how tight knit a community that the whiskey industry is.
Yeah, I mean, it's tight knit, and it's also about relationships and friendships. I mean, these, I'm sure, and every time I do one of these things, or I talk to people, they always ask me, what's your favorite whiskey if you're not drinking Michters? And I can't legitimately answer the question, because these people are my friends.
Totally.
I mean, these are like, I've grown up in this business with people like Jimmy Russell and Eddie Russell and Jim Rutledge, and they've all had an influence on who I am today, not because I worked for their companies, but because of the camaraderie in this industry, and because of the knowledge sharing and organizations like the Kentucky Distillers Association, where you get to be a part of that community, this intrinsic place to learn.
Which you were on the board of now, aren't you? Or you have been for a minute or two?
Yeah, I've been on the board for 15 years. I've been on the board of the Kentucky Distillers Association. I was awesome. The first woman to ever chair that organization. So very proud of that.
That is awesome.
But it's, when you it's hard to pick a whiskey and say, well, I love your whiskey more than yours. People have said, well, it's like your children. You're not going to outwardly say, well, I love you more than I love you. You just, you can't do it. And it's hard for me. And people think it's such just pick one. And I'm like, I can't do that, because I never want to be accused of loving one of my friends more than another. I think they're all, the beauty of Kentucky bourbon is that there's something for everyone.
Right.
And they're each individually different. They have a different cast of characters behind them, different stories, different ways of influencing the final product. And I think that's the overall beauty of the industry. So, I always encourage people, just taste, find what you like, find what you like today. Tomorrow you might like something else too.
Yep.
That's the joy of it.
1,000% agree. Although I do tell my children on different days which one I love more. All right, it's Tuesday. I love you way more than I love the other one right now. The other one, no, you're an obvious number 2 at the moment. But to your point, I've even stopped asking it that way, because it is, I've started asking the question, what are you drinking today? Because it's not really about your favorite as much as it is every whiskey that I have come across, I have found a place for it in my mood spectrum. It may not be like today is cold outside. Maybe I'm looking for something spicy, or it's hot outside. Maybe I'm looking for something refreshing. It doesn't have to do so much with what I like or who I like as much as my palate is craving this thing that I know is consistent and good. And when you change the question to that can be a whole series of people, because what is consistent and good applies to, luckily, a large part of the industry.
No, I love that. And I feel exactly the same way. I mean, what I drink on a Tuesday night after a 14-hour day versus a Saturday afternoon when I want to have a light, refreshing cocktail because it's 80 degrees outside, are two dramatically different things. Or if it's, my 25-year wedding anniversary, these things matter in terms of the overall mood or experience that you're talking about. And I do think it's a heavy influencer on the choice of the moment. So I love that concept.
Well, it's whiskey's like fine wine. It pairs differently with different scenarios. Only where you put wine with, say, a meal, I pair whiskey more with a scenario or an environment that I'm in, or a frame of mind that I'm in.
Yeah.
So what did you always know you wanted to work in whiskey? Like when you were a kid, I know that's a weird question, but the research I've done on you seem to have always liked to do things and make things. So was that like just something in the back of your head, that the way you put things together, you saw that as an interesting goal?
So the way I came about my path in this industry is, yes, I was definitely the child that had all the chemistry sets, all the erector sets, the easy bake oven, the rock tumblers, anything that made things, I had it, because that was my joy as a child. I loved to make things. And then as I was growing up, my grandfather on my father's side, he loved to fish. So we would go fishing together, all of us children, and it was a very magical experience. You can imagine as a child going with your grandfather. We found out later that it was a disaster for him, because he spent most of his time untangling the lines and feeding us and taking care of everything. But to us, it was fantastic. Our memories are great of these experiences. But he would tell us stories of his days when he was a moonshiner. And, it was very enchanting and intriguing. It was all completely illegal, but as a kid, you just loved hearing your grandfather tell you stories about these things that he did.
Totally.
And it was fascinating. And so at the end of our trip, he had friends at Maker's Mark, and we would always stop in Maker's Mark, and we'd get to taste the mash. And, this is long before there was a Kentucky Bourbon Trail or any of those things. And we enjoyed it very much. And as we grew up, whiskey was a part of our family experiences, but we also made beer and wine, not commercially, but just as a family.
Totally, just to do it.
So, I can remember we had grapevines and I would be in charge of picking the grapes, and I hated it because I hated spiders. So these were just things that, as you're going through your life and as you're growing up, they're part of your life journey. And I just always had this affinity that, I wanted to do something in the spirits industry. And the challenge for me became when it was time to enter university, it was like, what do you do? There were no, like, hey, come and take this curriculum to be a distiller, or take this curriculum to be in maturing science, or any of it. It just didn't exist. So right. For me, I've always had mentors in my life, whether it's family or friends or someone else, and they suggested, well, maybe find the closest thing you can, to it and go that direction. So I did. I chose chemical engineering. I became a Master of Chemical Engineering. I'm degreed from the University of Louisville. And then I was all excited about an opportunity in the industry. And then when I graduated in the 90s, it was very different time in the whiskey industry. I'll just say that, not
totally.
Like it is today.
It'd be like getting your finance degree in 2008.
Exactly. Great analogy. And so that was a tremendous disappointment for me, because it was difficult to even, get an interview for a job, because there just weren't any jobs in the whiskey business at that time. So, I ended up taking a position with a consulting firm, and now looking back, it was one of the best decisions that I ever made, because I learned so much about manufacturing. I learned about people and teams and projects and studies, and just got to work with so many interesting people. And I always tell people I did everything from cookies to oil.
Right.
It was fascinating time in my life, especially for somebody who loves to make things.
You learn the scope.
Exactly. And it was so great. And then, during that time is when Diageo called, and kind of went from there, and finally made it. And I can remember my grandfather had passed by that point. So I was really like, hey, I made it,
Right.
There was such a euphoria for me that I had finally achieved what I believed was my place in terms of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So
that's awesome. And you really have an appreciation for it when you get there, when you've gone through everything from oil to everything in between.
Yeah.
It's funny. When I was a kid, you were talking about the chemistry sets. I've never been inclined, I've been more interested with it than I have been good at it. You know what I mean? Like, I always was interested in chemistry, but then I'd set my arm on fire or something like that. Or more specifically, Justin Rogers' arm on fire, if I remember correctly. So for one of the science fair projects one year, I've always found it interesting. And I was talking to Nicole Austin from George Dickel a couple weeks ago, and she was talking how she started similar to you in like a similar water purification. Like, it still had the chemical engineering background to it, but it just wasn't like she worked her way up and moved up. One of the science projects I had, I was going to show how water purification worked. That was a science fair project. And unfortunately, all I ended up doing was bringing a lot. I don't know. This was a different time period. They wouldn't let you do this now. Ended up bringing a lot of raw sewage into the cafeteria of my high school. And of course, you know what happens next. The table turns over, it goes everywhere, and we all eat outside for 3 weeks. So I learned early on that I needed to be on this side of the conversation, and that my strengths were talking to people like yourself who could maybe let me live vicariously through you and what you're doing.
All right. Well, Hopefully your children will have better luck at the science fair.
I just tell them that's why I was an art major. So once you find your path and once you realize that's where you're going, you spend your time at Diageo and you leave there as the Master of Maturation. I told you I'd put a D in there again. You leave there as the Master of Maturation and you enter Michters as their Master of Maturation, correct?
I did not. I was never named Master of Maturation at Diageo.
Oh.
The last position I held at Diageo, I was I oversaw distillation and maturation for North America.
Oh, okay.
And then I came over to Michters and was given the title during my tenure at this facility. And, it's really interesting for me because Michters, I had been watching Michters as part of the competitive set for Bullet for a long time. And I knew the Malioco family, wonderful people, if you ever get to meet them, and had enjoyed learning about what they were doing with Michters and their passion and their commitment to this brand and what they wanted to achieve through quality was really special. And I thought that it was something that, they were just doing great things. And so that was exciting for me to become a part of that.
Well, and they really have been at the forefront of so many great things that we've seen in the industry as of late. First off, right out of the gate, it was one of the sought after bottles that when you start drinking whiskey, word of mouth does more for marketing than marketing sometimes. And somebody telling you something's good goes a lot further than an ad or, an email campaign. And having a friend turn you on to Michters right out of the gate, it's almost like an aha moment because you're like, oh yeah, this is what good's supposed to taste like.
I appreciate that. Well, there's a whole team of people here who I'll be sharing that with because we take people's comments very seriously. I mean, this brand has been built on, the team here, but also, there's so many great bartenders and consumers out there who've done exactly what you said. They have said, okay, you're ordering that. I'll get that for you, but I also want you to try this because I think you're going to really like it. And it's the conversation and it's the learning and it's the, and there have been so many people that just because of the adoration that they have for us and our brand, that they've done that on our behalf. And that is something that is really, really special to all of us. That's why it's so important to us. So we can't afford to have our whiskey not be good because we have too many people counting on it now, that, we have to make sure that we're meeting those expectations. So.
Well, totally, because once a consumer finds their brand, especially right now, there's a fierce loyalty to that brand. And you guys are up there with the people that have there are Michter camps,
I might need to go to a Michter's camp. Is there a Michter's camp? I didn't know that.
Well, it's just you go online and you've got people like, I have this bottle and this bottle and this bottle and this bottle. It's almost like baseball cards to the bourbon drinker. If they can get a bottle of Toasted Barrel, or if they can get a bottle of the 10-year, or if they can get a bottle of the Ever Elusive, the hunt is on, and Michters is always at the top of the list of things people are showing off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great honor, and we really do take it very seriously. Even with the 10-year series, it's been really interesting how people have responded to the different 10-year releases each year. Dan McKee and I try to work with the team to pull forward what we think are going to be the best cask for, potential consideration for the next 10-year release. We taste through them. Dan, has the final decision as master distiller. But it's so interesting because every time we release, having the freedom not to be, confined to that age statement. So on our 10-year products, it might be 10, but it might be quite older than 10. And most oftentimes it is older than 10 because that's just the way we operate. We make the selections based on the quality of whiskey. And that's something that, oftentimes gets overlooked. We're not a company run by numbers in terms of, okay, it's 4 years old, it has to go to the bottling line. Okay, the label says 10, so the moment that it hits 10 years old in one day, it goes to the bottling line. That's not how we operate. We operate based on cask selection of quality. So even in our, bourbon and rye that we'll get to tasting in a little while, even those products, sometimes they're 5, 6, 7, just depends on what we think is right to go to bottling. That's something really special about our brand, and it's a philosophy of operation that I'm quite thankful that, we're able to have that flexibility to choose the quality for the consumer. I think it's incredibly important.
Is that one of the things that plays into the Michters philosophy? Like, what are this? There are 6 points of the Michters philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes, there are 6. So there's a central kind of core belief system that is around quality. Even if you get to come to our production operation, you can eat off the floors. I mean, it is absolutely pristinely clean. And that's the way it's kept at all times. Even at the granary, you won't find grain all over everywhere. We keep it pristine at all times because quality for us transcends everything we do. I always tell people it's like going into a restaurant. I make a determination on the quality if I can peep in, into the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And if everything is organized and it's beautiful and it's well kept, it's probably going to be a great experience. But if it looks disheveled in there and confusing and plates stacked up everywhere, it's probably not going to be a great experience. So, we keep our house the same way we operate and our principles. So quality is kind of the foundation of our company. And then our 6 philosophies. So the first one is natural seasoning and air drying of wood. So this is something that, for me, I am incredibly passionate about. We naturally season and air dry all of our wood for making barrels at least 18 months, sometimes up to 5 years.
What does that mean, natural seasoning?
So when the wood is cut into planks, they will stage it out in a yard and they stack it. Looks like a big Jenga game. And you've kind of got spots in the wood stack where air is able to move through the stack. And it's undergoing seasoning in that it's sitting outside for at least 18 months, sometimes up to 5 years. And what's happening during that time is the wood is changing. So it's being subjected to all of the elements, all of the seasonal changes, but it's also growing, different fungi and things on it. So it's experiencing not only physical changes, but it's experiencing chemical changes as well as microbiological changes. And the reason why that's important is because we want the wood, we don't want green, astringent, bitter characters coming from the wood. We want to get rid of all of that so that we can extract and reveal more of the beauty that wood has to offer so that it's not overwhelmed by all these things that we don't care about. So that is a really important part of our philosophy, and we can talk more about that. There's the second piece, which is toasting and charring of wood. So everyone will be acquainted with, to make a Kentucky bourbon, you've got to use a new charred oak. The law does not specify toasting or natural air drying and seasoning, nor does it specify the oak type. It just says new charred oak.
Okay.
So toasting is the art of slow heating the wood over time. And as you do that, you break down different compounds in the wood that then can be extracted into your final product. And you get some really beautiful characters, but they're dependent on time and temperature. And there are hundreds of different toasting profiles. There's not, like with charring, everybody knows, it's, is it a number 1 char, a 4 char, a 3 char, a 2 char? There are hundreds of different toasting profiles. And the way you toast determines the final outcome of your extractable compounds from the wood. So in other words, you can toast at a really high temperature right away.
Right.
Or you could, start at a lower temperature and kind of step it up and maybe only go so far. But like, for example, if you toast at a really high temperature, say 800 degrees Fahrenheit, some people would be horrified by that and say, I didn't even know you could toast. Basically, they make a small white oak fire. They put the barrel over it like a cylinder, and it's radiating heat. The interior of the barrel is not on fire. It's just radiating heat. Halfway through the process, they'll flip it over and do the same thing for the other half of the barrel, because at a small little fire,
right,
you can't reach the top portion of the barrel. So they'll do that. The way they monitor it is they put probes inside the wood to monitor the interior temperature of the wood, or they'll use a heat gun. But repeatability is very important.
Right.
So they have to provide to us the toasting accuracy, because we have to know that it's the right temperature for the right amount of time in order to confirm that we're going to be able to get those extractable compounds that we're expecting. Then it moves on to charring. And charring, you have to have balance between toast and char, but charring would be, typically charring is not more than a minute. And depending on your different char level, determines the thickness of that char layer. Now, people sometimes kind of dismiss the char, but I always tell people the importance between toasting and char is you have to have balance. So, you could literally do all of this good work to release these extractable compounds and then literally burn them up with the wrong char level. So right, you have to have balance between the two. But the darker your char goes, the more darker, toastier characteristics, oakier characteristics that you're going to get. Whereas the lighter char levels, that's where you're going to get more of your fruitier, lighter kinds of elements shining through in your spirit. So char level does matter a whole lot.
Why is that? Why is it that the lighter char would give you the fruity and the heavier char will let the oak and the toast come out?
It's because you're burning the wood layer deeper, so you're creating a deeper thickness of char, and the char is a catalyst for a lot of beautiful reactions. The deeper the char level, again, the more you're going to take away from the spirit, whereas the lighter the char level, the more you're just giving it a gentler sort of, it acts like its own internal filter, and you can get a lot of more beautiful, fruitier characteristics and softer characteristics with a lighter char level than the darker one or deeper one.
Okay, so
it's not that deeper is bad. It's not that deeper is bad. There's plenty of people who are using a char level 4 and making beautiful Kentucky bourbons. I'm just trying to give you some understanding. At Michters, both really matter to us. We have to look at both sides of that equation. What are we trying to get from the toasting process? And then what is the right char level to match that, depending on what we're trying to do and what is it we're trying to highlight from the spirit.
Most definitely. I mean, that goes back to the beginning of our conversation. There's really no wrong answer. It depends on what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a chess game.
So that's
constant chess match of flavor.
So, and that's part of we have an incredibly talented team here, and this is part of, there's a lot of science that we use at Michters and in this industry to, validate what we're doing and to monitor it and to control the processes and all of that. But then there is a lot of artistry.
Oh, completely.
You have to you have to think about what is it we're trying to alter in the spirit and how are we going to do that. And that then leads you to the conversation about toast and char levels and natural seasoning and air drying of the wood. And there's a tremendous amount of complexity in trying to put the puzzle together in terms of, well, these three things influence this spirit. So how long am I going to naturally season and air dry the wood? How long am I going to toast? And how long am I going to char? And, right. Depending on those choices, you could have the exact same spirit, but those three choices could dramatically impact the outcome of what that spirit's going to be.
Totally. I think
so that's
that.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. That's I'm just soaking it all in.
Oh, you're fine. So it's we've talked about the natural seasoning and air drying. We've talked about toasting and charring. The next philosophy is low entry proof. So this is one of Michter's greatest signatures, is that we enter into wood at 103 entry proof. So what that means is we're going to be about 75% whiskey in the barrel, about 25% water. Now, water is a powerful hydrolyzer. So you think, your glass of water at home, you put some sugar in there, it dissolves readily. It's the same thing with wood sugar. So with all that water in there, we can get a lot of rich barrel chemistry going in the process, and that's very important for us. You think about water and it being a catalyst. It's an H or it's two H's and an O, so it will grab onto things very quickly, and it will start reaction chemistry very quickly, and that's very important to us in our process. Now, it's significantly costly because obviously 25% water in a barrel, we're laying down a lot more barrels.
Right.
But the importance of the process is that when we come out of wood, we're only going to be about 110 to 112 proof. So we don't add as much water at bottling to get to bottling strength. In fact, we add over 50% less water to get to bottling strength. Whereas if we were going in at a higher proof, the industry allowed entry proof is 125 proof. So if you went in at 125, you might come out of wood 135 or even more, depending on where you were stored in the warehouse. So then now you've got to add a whole lot more water at the end, and that's water that's just dilution.
Right.
It's not giving you any added benefit, whereas the water we're adding at the front end is becoming part of that whiskey process and is intrinsic to the final product. So I always just tell people you get more whiskey in the bottle with Michters.
That also, that just proves the philosophy that you guys are all about quality. You knew you were going to have to put water in it at some point, so you put water in it where water can be the most helpful. Is how I heard that.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. And it's interesting because prior to 1962, the standard used to be 110 was the maximum entry proof. But that was another time in our history when, things were not going well for the whiskey industry. And so the entry proof was raised to a maximum of 125. And that was based on the distillers coming together to say, what's the maximum entry proof that we can go into barrel and still achieve quality? Because, that would allow you to use less barrels and you would need less barrel spaces. And, that was an avenue to manage that. But we do conform to the old standard, and we're very proud of doing that. We do believe it creates a richer, creamier, we have a house style of great mouthfeel, a lot of rich flavor, and we believe that that is a key contributing factor to that.
Yeah, that just when And by bringing it in, by raising that proof level, you can almost like crystal ball to where we are right now with so many people leaning towards the spicier, the barrel proofs, the cask strengths, like all of that sort of stems from that decision. And you're saying that that came from almost a not a quality control, but almost like a self perseverance, or trying to protect the industry so that you could make more and not have to spend as much because it was sort of a harder time and you needed to make it go a little further.
Yep. And that's not the only example in the industry of, times when things have, the industry has had to do things out of necessity, to keep the lights on. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's whiskey, American whiskey now, is booming, and it's an amazing time to be in this industry, but it wasn't always like that. There were times when, after Prohibition, after, 2 world wars, the whiskey industry was not as lucrative anymore. People's taste had changed. People were familiar with lighter whiskeys, and the Canadian whiskeys, and there's a whole time period where the American whiskey industry was really struggling, and it's exciting to see what's happening now. But it's even interesting today to think about all of the, the aging process. Barrels are aging a lot longer now, and, people are releasing older age statement products. And, that's interesting as well, because that was never a thing either, and so it's been interesting to see how this industry has evolved into what is now, such a booming business, not only in the U.S., but globally.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, is the increase in age, because when I was always taught that, like, bourbon specifically, like there's, and again, I look to you for your expertise, like bourbon versus Scotch. You can market Scotch as being in the barrel for all of this time, with the expectation that time equals better. Where with bourbon, a lot of time, like too much, there is such a thing as too much time, correct?
Yes, there can be a point of no return. Yes.
And I figured you would be the person to ask about this. What is the difference there? Like, why is certain scotches the higher year craved, but for bourbon, it's, for me, that sweet spot's always been like 8 to 12 or 10 to 15. What's going on in the wood to make that change between the two spirits?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, what I would say is that the maturing process is a complicated series of things going on. But essentially, every decision that you make is going to determine longevity in the barrel. And people don't often realize that it's not as simple. I mean, you can do this. You can just get have a barrel made, take it to the kiln, get it dried, get it ready to go, put the whiskey in it, throw it in a warehouse, and come back one day, and it'll be whatever it's going to be. That may be great. It may not be so great. If you start to break down the maturing process into all of its individual elements, you start to realize you do have a significant amount of control on how that whiskey is going to age. And so things like how you prepare the wood, whether you toast and char the wood or not, the entry proof of the spirit into wood, how long you're aging, how your warehouses are constructed, what's the temperature, like in your warehouses, how much air movement are you getting, what's the humidity, all of these factors play a role in how that spirit is going to age over time, and many others that I'm not even mentioning. But I think the approach we take at Michters is we're trying to look after that whiskey through its entire life cycle such that we have some control.
Right.
And even with our older age spirits, we are trying to, we don't just let them go forever. If we take a sample from a barrel and we find that that particular barrel has reached its peak of maturation, we're not just going to leave it there to somehow start to take on really woody characters that are then no value to us as a profile. We'll go ahead and stop the aging. We'll put that barrel, we'll dump it, we'll put it to a stainless steel drum, and we'll hold it. And then we'll use it whenever it's time to use it. So we can't age it anymore. It's done. So if it was, let's say it was 15 years, stays 15 years.
Right.
But we don't leave it in the warehouse to become something that's overly oaked and you can't use it. And what are you going to do with it after that? So, part of what you're talking about is how are you controlling your process? If you're not, then you're at much higher risk of, we put it in and it came out the way it came out. And so back to the question of, what's happening over time, as barrels are aging, there's more and more chemistry that's happening over time. The location in the warehouse, that is something that, for Michters, we're trying to get uniformity across an entire warehouse. Whereas, a lot of these styles of warehouses are multiple floors, and the higher the floors, the hotter it's going to be, the more rapid the maturation is going to be. The lower the floors, the cooler it's going to be, and the less fast the maturation will be. And so, that's another variable. It can be, just in overall whiskey, not necessarily at Michters, but that's another variable that's in play. But as things get older, then you're going to get into some of the covalent bonding inside the chemistry is going to get tighter. The product can now start to get into, you've been increasing the amount of ester profile in the spirit. You've been increasing the fatty acids over time. You've been doing all these things over time. And at some point, like you said, the belief of what's the right age or what's the best age for a whiskey varies depending on who you talk to. Some people will say 8 to 12. Some people will say 12 to 15. Personally, we've got some great products in our portfolio at 20 and 25 years old that are amazingly beautiful whiskeys. So, to me, there's not a, I think there's a general, like 8 to 12, you've got some really great whiskeys for their age in there. But I do think there is a way to create really beautiful whiskeys at older age, such as we've done with our 20-year bourbon, 25-year rye, and even our celebration product, which is a blend, but it has some whiskeys in it that are over 30 years old.
Well, and that's why I figured you would be the person to ask about that, because you're 20. I've never had the I've been on the lookout, but I've never had the pleasure of having the 25 yet. I'll put yet in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still youngish, but the 20 is so good, and it just sort of it put my entire because you form opinions based on your what you don't know yet. So I'd always thought that like you're 8 to 12 or 12 to 15, like you just said, but then you get a bottle or a glass, if you're lucky enough, of the Michters 20 or the 25, and the 20 was just so ridiculously good. It was like your whole perception of what's possible changes a little bit. So I think maybe the the problem might just be the question, in that if you get any whiskey that's been aged the wrong way for too long, you're not going to get what you want. But if you take your time with it and you do it the right way with people that know what you're doing, and specifically taste it to blend it and taste it to where you want it to be, you will get something good. So it's all about the process more so than the assumption.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, I just go back to, it's all about the decisions that you make. I mean, details matter in this business, and decisions matter. And every step that you take has an influence on that final product. And I think there are great whiskeys out there, but it's not always associated with, what's the age of the product. I agree with you. The 20-year bourbon it's a symphony of flavor. I mean, it's
Yes.
like making your best sheet of music ever. It's fantastic. But I also think, just like our regular bourbon and rye are such beautiful whiskeys for the age that they are, and I think that's something that, for us, we're really proud of the process and the freedom that we are afforded here to really put those decisions into operation that allow us to get these final products the way we want them to be, for our consumers. Because certainly, every one of these decisions costs money too.
Right,
the natural seasoning and air drying of the wood, that doesn't come for free. Cooperages don't say, sure, we'll hold your wood for 2 years out in our yard.
Right.
What? No. We'll hold it for you for a price. And that's no disrespect to cooperages. The relationship between a cooperage and a distiller is a very, very tight and very important relationship. But, it is business. And so there's a cost for the natural seasoning and air drying. There's a cost for the additional toasting. There's a cost for the charring. There's all these costs that are adding up. But those decisions help you with the longevity of aging. So if you're getting rid of some of that, really tannic components of the wood early on, that's going to benefit you as you're looking to age for a long time in that barrel. So that's just one example of a simple thing that you can do if you're looking to produce a longer aged whiskey, that will really behoove you to consider that, at the front end. And so I'm a little bit rambling here, but this is what I do. I just keep talking because I get so excited about stuff. But
I'm just so interested that the everything you're saying, like one of the things that I think interests me the most is just one of the pieces of the puzzle that gets overlooked is the maturation. Everybody and each part has a lot to play. Like every part's equally important, but the chemistry behind what happens in the wood is something that has eluded me in terms of understanding. Like once it goes into the wood and how it breaks down and how the flavors break out, I think the philosophies you were talking about is eye-opening in themselves, because you don't think about that. Like the general consumer, as we're enjoying it, we know that there's things happening. We focus on ourselves. We focus on the palate and our experience. But the next level of that, to me, on my journey is, oh my God, I'm one of those people that just talked about my journey. Oh no. But one of the things that I've been trying to figure out and enjoy more is, how is this thing tasting the way? Like, okay, I've recognized the flavors. Now the question is, where did those flavors come from? And of course, yes, it is the distilling and it is the blending, but it's also the maturation.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful to you for making the statement about maturation. I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, and certainly there's a lot of euphoria and excitement around, what's your mash bill, what yeast are you using, and, and there just hasn't been as much education or time spent on the maturing side of the business. And I think that's it's exciting that these conversations are happening now, and you're seeing all kinds of different producers, making their way into using different oaks and doing different things. And I think that's incredibly exciting for the industry and for the consumer. We have, some beautiful releases. We have our Heritage series, which is, or Legacy series, which is more about shanks and Baumburgers. And those two releases we've used as opportunities to try, different types of oak and things like that are fun for consumers to enjoy. And we haven't quite settled in what those products are going to be on an annual basis, but they've got release dates on them now. So like you were talking earlier, people who want to do verticals and compare things from year to year and collect and talk about it, that's part of the joy. That's the joy of doing this. And I think it's incredibly exciting to see how people are using different oaks. We've used French oak here. We've used chinkapin oak. We've got some other beautiful oaks that we're aging as well. And they're really, really remarkable in terms of the flavor profiles that they can yield. And that's really exciting in terms of, innovation opportunities as well.
Well, and it's exciting too because it's broadening the business. It's something where the hardest thing to do is create urgency, especially when you're a business of consistency. So you're creating urgency by, instead of, you don't want to alter the consistency, of course, because good is good, and if you don't sell your third bottle, you're not going to sell your fourth. But to create urgency in that if you don't get the 2020, the 2021 is going to be different. It's still going to be good, but it's not going to be the same. So you got to go out and you got to buy it twice. You've got to get one 2020, one 2021, if for nothing else, to sit down and go tasting a slight difference. Like that's just a beautiful long-term marketing strategy to create vintages with your expressions.
Yeah, and it's very fun for consumers too. I've also done the 10-year bourbon vertical. I can remember doing that several years ago, and it was very interesting because when we did it, all the whiskeys were poured, everybody tasted, we tasted through them, everybody gave their commentary. Oh, I like this year better than that year. I like this. Okay.
Right.
And then I said, okay, we're going to do an exercise and we're going to leave these. So they all got re-poured. We left them and we left them open to the air and we talked for a while. Probably about a half an hour, we did the tasting again. And it was amazing to see how people's viewpoints changed because it was a blind. And so it was interesting for everyone because everybody was wowed. They were like, oh, I didn't like the 16, but now I do. 30 minutes later, it tasted so much different and it was blind and I didn't realize it, and so that's part of the fun of working with these whiskeys too, is that when we're evaluating a whiskey for release, we're not only evaluating it the moment that we poured it in the glass on its color and its aromatics and the beauty of it, the texture and the experience across your palate. We're going to evaluate it again in 15 minutes, again in 30 minutes, again in 45 minutes to see how that whiskey is changing.
Right.
And, there are some real beautiful products that Michters has released that if you'll give them a minute to sit in your glass, you'll understand why it's so beautiful and why it's such a powerhouse. And I think that's a really special part of what we also this is what we're trying to share, with consumers, is that these are really, we had a writer tell us one time that our whiskeys were like book bourbons. You pour them in the glass and you want to sit with them over time while you're reading your book, because they change so dramatically. And that's a really special part of, what we're offering here too, in terms of the overall final product that we're delivering.
Well, and that's a perfect segue, because I poured, I agree with you 1,000%. So I poured, some of what you sent me at the beginning of our conversation, so that, and it's torture. It's absolute torture. I've had it sitting here under my nose for the past hour. And, I'm just like, as you were saying that, I'm like, she's absolutely right, because I've sat here and just the nose has even expanded in terms of, like, at the beginning, you're getting a little bit of that alcohol because I just opened the bottle, and now it's been sitting for 45 minutes, and I've had hits like a tropical storm. It's like every time I get a whiff, it's like you'll get this, then you'll get that, you'll get clean, you'll get creamy, and now it's just sitting there. Oh, now it's just nice and balanced, like a big cream soda malt wonderful thing. But yes, I've had them open. I've had them aerating for the last little bit. Very much look forward to trying them with you. You have sent me the Michters small batch bourbon, the Michters single barrel straight rye, and the envy of a lot of folks right now, when I shared with them that you had sent me the new limited release barrel strength Kentucky straight rye whiskey.
Yes.
And that one, it just it strikes the imagination. You're sitting there like, oh, it's going to be so good. So where do you where should we start? Or so we can start sipping some whiskey if you'd like to. We also, I feel like we only scratched the surface of the maturation process, but I have already kept you now for over an hour, so I don't want to get greedy with your time.
Oh, I'm fine. I still have some more philosophies to talk about.
Hooray! Well, I have nothing but ears.
Yeah.
So I think we got through we got through 4 of the philosophies. We got into the low entry proof.
Yep. And then we actually, once the barrels are completed filling, then they're going to go into the ricks and they're going to sit there and they're going to age. Now, we employ a process called heat cycling.
Okay.
So winter months, we're going to heat up our warehouses and then we're going to allow them to naturally cool down. And the purpose of that process is that we want to increase the liquid temperature inside the barrel. As that increases, it increases the pressure inside the barrel and pushes the whiskey into the wood. Then we're going to hold for a period of time, and then we're going to naturally cool down. And as that liquid temperature inside the cool cools down, the pressure releases, the whiskey flows back to the center of cask, pulling color, flavor, aroma, all of those beautiful flavor extractives from the wood. That's what we want. And so we're increasing the interaction between the wood and the whiskey during the winter months, when the cask would normally just be kind of sitting there.
Almost like a heat accordion.
And the purpose of this is to increase the maturing quality of the spirit. So while we can't claim this, on our bottles or anything, we know from testing, et cetera, that if you, for every year that we heat cycle, we're increasing the maturing quality of the spirit about 6 months. So if you said the whiskey was 6 years old, we'd be expecting the profile to be something more on the order of 8 to 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I actually have some bottles here just to kind of show. I don't know if you can see them that well, but they show just color deviation. So if you look at, this bottle is 1 month old. So you can see, how clear it is, but it's already taking on some color. Now, if you look down here, this is 3 months. Then we're moving into 6 months. So at 6 months, it's already got quite a bit of color. You can see at 1 month, it's deep, rich in color.
And that's after how long?
That was after 1 year.
After 1 year, okay.
That's after 1 year. And then, this is what it looks like at 2 years old. So it's really dark and rich and beautiful in color.
Hold that up against the first one. I think it's just like the contrast is uncanny. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So that is, a big reason. I mean, color is only one variable that we're looking at, but when we talk about this process of interaction between wood and whiskey and getting that movement to happen all year long, that's really, really what's driving the maturing quality of our spirit as well. And that's also not an inexpensive process, but something, again, that we're investing behind the quality of the spirit that we want people to enjoy.
And completely making the most of your time.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait till COVID protocols are over and we can go to places.
I know.
And see that fabulous bar. So
it just affects everybody. I've been a comic for 10 to 12 years, and it's the first time I've not been home this long in I don't know how long. Like you're on the road every weekend, and now you're home.
Yeah, it's the same here. I mean, it's the same for everyone. There's just no, getting away from anything. I mean, I'm thankful that we're able to come here every day, but during, all of this, our Fort Nelson distillery downtown has been closed to visitors, but all the people who work there, they all came and they've been working in production now for over a year. So, it's been an amazing time for them as well. And we have not had to furlough anyone, and we're just trying to continue to do what we can to help our community and support our local bars and restaurants. So big shout out to them.
Oh, most definitely. And I think the whiskey industry's done a great job of supporting local bars and restaurants through all of this. Like so many companies and so many great people have gone out of their way to raise money and just, like Wright Thompson, he's a part of a great philanthropy that raises money for the restaurant and bar personnel and helps them stay afloat through all of this. Like just a lot of good people doing great things.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see how, there's just a tremendous amount of power in people coming together to support each other.
And I think we were on, we got to Philosophy 5.
Okay. The last philosophy is custom chill filtration. So people will be familiar with chill filtration, and there will probably be a lot of judgment about whether it's good or bad, and people's belief systems in non-chill filtered whiskey, etc. Mm-hmm. But I think the one thing that I want to, stress to people is that this is a very skillful filtration that is designed not only based on the particular expression that we're talking about, but it's designed to take into consideration all of the complexity that's been developed over time. So when we develop our chill filtration protocols, they're different by expression. So a bourbon's not filtered the same, is not filtered the same as a 10-year or an American whiskey or whatever. They're all different. The variables include time and pressure and temperature, but it also includes the type of equipment, the type of filter pad, the micron size of the filter media. Change any one of those variables and you change the outcome. And that is why, we spend so much time. This is a completely inefficient process, but it really, really does allow us to highlight and accentuate that whiskey's best qualities.
And how do you figure out what goes with what? Like, is it just trial and error to figure out which filtration is going to work best with which expression?
So sometimes with the media, yes, it's just, let's try it and see what happens. But there's a lot of work that we do on the front end to understand the chemistry of the spirit, and then we're designing the process around that. And while there might be a lot of naysayers out there when we do the tasting, or if you're doing a tasting at home with Michters, I want you to pay attention to the color. I want you to pay attention to the mouthfeel. I want you to pay attention to the taste of the product and the aromatics of the product. These are all things that people would say if you chill filter a product, it can impact color, flavor, aroma, texture, mouthfeel. All of those things can be impacted. And I agree with that. That's why you have to skillfully think about what is it you're trying to achieve with that product. And the best way that I've come to explain it to people is that we're using barrels for the first time. They're incredibly rich. They're incredibly flavorful. Just like if you were using a tea bag for the first time, there's a lot of flavor. The second, third, fourth, fifth time you use a tea bag, not so much.
Right.
But there's an incredible amount of oak extractives that are coming into our product because of all the preparation of the wood that we've done. So when you think about that, we have a product that comes out of wood, and it's going to have some dominant characteristics. And for me, the analogy is if you're in a room with 10 people and 9 of them are talking really loud, the one person that has a soft voice, you can't even hear them. You don't know what they're saying.
Right.
What we're trying to do is kind of adjust the noise level a little bit in the room so that you can also hear that 10th person talking. And that's the beauty of the chill filtration process, is that there's a lot of really beautiful nuances of flavor that can be overshadowed by the dominant characteristics, these big profiles that come forward. Everybody's like, oh, it's so this or it's so that. We want people to experience it. And you were saying it earlier, like these different flavors, you're able to identify them. You're like, oh, there's some cherry, or there's some buttercream, or there's some toffee, or, there's some brown sugar, whatever it is, however it resonates for you is fine. But that dissection of flavor, that's what we want to happen for you. We don't want it to be like, oh yeah, I tasted it, it was all pepper. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's beautiful, for some people, but that's not what we're trying. We're trying to go for a dynamic experience that's sort of beginning, middle, and end. And we want it to resonate for people in that way. So this is why, custom chill filtration is a key philosophy for us around creating our spirit. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but we are all single barrel or small batch here. And, everything goes through the chill filtration process with a custom protocol that's been designed for that spirit. But then, our batches are incredibly small. The batches for us are the equivalent of the size of 20 full barrels. That's not very big.
No.
So, there's no legal definition for what a small batch is, but it's, again, the testament to quality. The discipline that we have to be able to produce at that small of a level on a consistent basis is something that we're really proud of. And the team here does a remarkable job with that every day.
Well, it seems like every step of the process has been just fine-tuned to create the most consistent, tasty liquid that you possibly can.
Yep.
And
that's why we spend so many hours here making great whiskey. I mean, it's what we do. We're really incredibly passionate about it. But if you want to start with tasting, we can. What would you like to start with? Would you like to start with the rye?
Well, you let me know. I figured we would start with the bourbon and work our way to the rye, just so we could go from rye to the barrel strength rye.
Okay, no problem.
But
Sounds
I'm in
good.
your hands. Whatever you say we do, we do.
It's fine. This is our bourbon. So I'm looking at it and not looking at you all. So this is our bourbon. I always have trouble getting it lined up.
Oh, it smells amazing.
And, you know, one of the first things that I always do is I always like to look at the color. And so it's got this beautiful color, but if you swirl it in your glass and get it up on the sides of the glass and then just kind of turn it right side again and let it sit there for a second, you'll see that it has a lot of viscosity. So it takes the legs a long time to start coming down the side of the glass, which is a testament also to the, you know, the mouth feel that you're going to have with this product.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it sits there for a minute before it starts walking.
But it's got this great, very attractive nose. I think that, you know, it's a very, it's got a fruity nose. It's got a caramel nose. It's almost got like this, and I tend to sometimes when I do these things, my memory reverts back to experiences in life, but it's almost also this butter pecan kind of experience for me.
Totally.
I used to be a big fan of butter pecan ice cream.
Well, I definitely get like a creamy, a nutty, definitely you get the sweet. The more that I do it, the less I try to expand too heavily on descriptors, just because I'll find myself rambling for like, and I plus too, I don't know how good my palate is to go on and on. Like, I don't know if I should be going, I get a hint of familiarity combined with a hint of whimsy. Like I try just to keep it top level, just to let whoever's listening, you're the one we should be listening to, not me. You know what I mean?
No, and I feel the same way though. I mean, I like it when, you know, just on a personal level, if I taste or smell something and I'm tasting whiskey with you and smelling with you and you smell or taste the same thing, it's like validation for me. I'm like, yes, you got the same thing I did. So I do think there's almost an intimidation factor when you're doing tastings and things. And, you know, nobody wants to be that person that's like, well, I get this. And everybody goes, oh, I don't get that.
Right. You know, be wrong.
Yeah. And so I like people to talk. I mean, part of it for me is just talking about what you're getting. And I don't want to dominate the conversation because, I think each individual has their own experience, and whatever it is for you is wonderful. You know, it doesn't have to be my experience. I'm trying to share with you the things that we're looking for in the product. We're looking for rich, flavorful, easy drinking whiskeys that really resonate with you, you know, both front, middle, and back of the palate.
Well, this thing is, it's cheers. I know we've both gone in for a couple sips, one together.
I know. Sorry, I couldn't wait any longer.
Oh my goodness.
Drinking water.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. It's really, really nice sipping whiskey.
It's so balanced. And you're right, the mouthfeel, like it just works the room. Like it leaves no point of contact unaffected. And you get a wonderful, like the palate on this thing, like I'm getting dark fruit and I'm getting sweet.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of, oh man. It doesn't leave. Like the finish on this is wonderful. Like it eases into the finish.
It finishes for me. It always reminds me of pralines, and you know, no one else may get that, but it just reminds me of pralines. It's not that it tastes like a praline; it just reminds me of pralines. You know, just sort of that brown sugar, sweet, kind of nutty. I like it.
Well, I definitely, that brown sugar is totally there, and the brown sugar kind of reveals itself intermittently. Like you get it right when you sip it, and then it comes back again at the back of your palate right at the finish.
super fun. I mean, it's a super
fun.
fun whiskey to drink. And this is people always ask me, well, which Michters is your favorite? And I can never answer that because I'm completely dependent, like you said at the very beginning, I'm completely dependent on the occasion. But I do probably drink a lot of bourbon. I just have a very bourbon palate, and I love our bourbon. So
it is absolutely phenomenal. It is complex. There's dimension to it. It's dangerous, is what it is, because the drinkability. It's got the burn. It's got a good burn. Like it's got a burn that you enjoy. So it's not like. There's no warning signs. There's nothing telling you that like, all right, buddy, you've had 3. You might want to slow it down a little bit. And I think that cold filtration comes into play there, because the longer it sits with you, the more it does open up and the more flavor you are getting from it. Like even just now, I just, in preparation for the next sip, I took a sip of water, and a sip of water right after finishing my pour is like fireworks. Like it just amplified the rest of what was left from the finish. It's just wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I kind of want more of that.
All right. Well,
this cut to like 9 hours from now, and you and I have just finished like 2 bottles of bourbon.
Nobody will ever watch the podcast. They'll be like, oh my God, this thing just went on forever.
I was with them until hour 7 when they both got hungry and ordered DoorDash.
All right. So I guess we should move on to the Kentucky Straight Rye.
Yes, please.
So that is that. So now our rye is more of a Kentucky style rye. So it's going to have over 51% rye grain, but then we're going to supplement with corn and malted barley to really balance the spicy characteristics of the rye. So it's super smooth, very easy to drink rye whiskey. I know a lot of times people will say, no, I don't want any rye. I don't drink rye. And there are a lot of really beautiful rye whiskeys on the market, but they are higher in rye content in the recipe, and that makes them very bold and spicy. And so for people who don't enjoy bold and spicy, that can be problematic. I always tell people I akin those to like a really peaty Scotch.
Right.
You either really like it or you don't. And it's the same thing with a high rye whiskey. You either really like it or you don't. They can be really beautiful, but not everybody enjoys them. We try to create something that's very approachable as a rye whiskey, super easy to drink, holds up fantastic in cocktails. Any of these spirits that you're going to taste here are just amazing for classic cocktails.
Well, I could sit with this nose all day. Like the nose is just phenomenal. The spice comes through. I'm getting butterscotch. Like I'm getting a very creamy, buttery, spicy nose on this.
Yeah, I agree. And there's just a little bit of floral, a little bit of mint for me too. Sort of like a honeysuckle flower.
Yes.
And,
honeysuckle says it perfectly.
Again, I go back to my experiences that, when I was a little girl, I used to pull out the stem of the center of the honeysuckle, and there'd be like the one little drop of, of liquid on the end, and just very soft, very elegant, just
very delicate, like very like just a perfect little hint of sitting on top of the rest of it. Oh.
And if you keep smelling, there's even just a little bit of spearmint.
I was going to, you get the spearmint and mint after a minute or two. This is making me thirsty. Like this is just like, I love me a good rye. You guys make a phenomenal rye.
Oh,
so this is, salute.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
And then right on the palate, you get that spice, like that wonderful, wonderful rye spice, followed by that malted barley.
It's just a nice, easy finish. I mean, it's got the pepper, it's got that little baking spice element, but super smooth finish. This is another one that could get you into trouble.
Oh, very easily. I think your barley comes through nicely as well. Like there's that nice hint of malt there, and the malt mixed with the spice, it's just so balanced.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Oh, and the way they interact with one another, like the nose and the palate, like this one tells a definite story to me. And there's a weight to this one that you could see it making a beautiful cocktail. Like if you wanted a whiskey forward old fashioned, this would be a proper frickin' old fashioned juice.
We've been supported by a lot of amazing bartenders who, have taught me a lot about making cocktails. And it's so fascinating to me because many of them have said, we love working with Michters. And they said, because we don't have to work so hard to balance the cocktail. Like, if you have something that stands up well to other ingredients, they don't have to work as hard to offset this or that or to try to balance the cocktail. It's just really easy to balance it straight away with, a couple of ingredients. And so I find that very interesting because I think that, kind of traces back to the lower entry proof, kind of coming out of wood at a lower proof and then not having to add as much water at bottling. You're using your cocktail ingredients to really do that work for you, when you're making the cocktail.
I can see that. I can totally see that. It comes out of the gate ready for them. Good Lord. I don't have a favorite yet. Like they're both like neck and neck for me. I'll do like you said with your vertical. I will pour me another one and then I'll just do something else for an hour and then I'll come back. And then when my wife is like, why are you doing it again? I'll be like, Andrea told me to. I made a promise.
Oh, great. That's great. All right. So now we've got the barrel strength rye.
Yes.
So we just released this March of this year. So it's brand new this month.
And I mean, just right off the bat, just your nose in the bottle's like candy in a dish.
So it is, we're really excited about this one. It is a powerhouse, definitely. I love it. But you can compare too between the rye that you just had and then this is at cask strength.
And the color is even like the color right out of the gate is a deeper amber.
Really beautiful.
Very, very beautiful. Oh my goodness. It's like everything you just had if it was lifting weights. Oh, that nose is just superb. You get it's like literally what we just said, the rye, it's a more pronounced spice, it's a more pronounced I'm getting more dark fruit from it than I was the original rye. Still getting hints of butterscotch, still getting hints of maybe getting a little more wood off of it, a little more of the oak than I was the previous round. But you're still getting the honey and still getting the spearmint.
Yeah, I think it's got this really raisin pecan sort of buttercream nose.
Oh, it's lovely. I've used all of my youthful descriptors. I used to just say something was awesome. Now I've had to evolve into it's lovely. It's lovely, Andrea. The nose on this is lovely. Oh, that is so good. Okay,
What was the proof on yours? What was the proof?
110, I think. 110.8. All right. Again, as we have said, there are no favorites. There are only today. And for today, I love this one. This one is it's so freaking good. It's oh my goodness. Oh, and even like it continues, the aromatic continues after you've drank it. Like I just took a deep inhale and the nose has carried through into the palate. It is phenomenal.
It is really super balanced. It's really, really, it's just got a lot of complexity to it. And, you know, sometimes the way when we're doing tastings, I evaluate things, I'm looking at them and, you know, we're evaluating color, we're evaluating texture, aroma. But when it comes to taste, for me, you know, it's beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
And I'm looking at that. But then I'm also like, how many descriptors can I identify? You know, if I've only got one or two, it may be a really good whiskey. But to me, that's a signature of a complex whiskey, is when you can just keep tasting and keep identifying things that you feel like you're tasting or you're smelling or that it's making you think of. And that to me is the signature of a, you know, a really complex, beautiful whiskey.
Do you get cherry from it, like in the middle?
So I'm not at this moment getting cherry, but I have gotten the cherry before. So
like right
cherry,
in the
I
middle.
think, was on my original tasting notes for the barrel strength release.
Because I've got it like right now, it's just a wonderful cherry right in the middle of the tongue.
Did you already have yours poured?
No.
Okay.
I had it. I've never had this one before, so I wanted to taste it right out of the gate.
Gotcha.
And I'll definitely do like I said and leave one out for a little bit so I can try it again. The other two I've had sitting for about 30 to 45 minutes.
That's what I was wondering, because when I originally tasted, I got the cherry on this, but I'm not getting it right now. But mine's been sitting here for a few minutes, probably for a little while now, actually.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've gone for a minute or two, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is so good. So very, very good. And this is coming out right now. I believe this is either just hitting or it has just hit. So to everybody listening, when you see this, pick it up, because it won't be there very long. You already know that. If you're listening to this show, you know that it won't be there very long. So pick it up when you see it. If you don't want it, bring it to me. I'll take it. Absolutely delightful. Well, yeah. Andrea, you've been so free with your time today. I've kept you way longer than we thought we would go, but I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Like, it's just I get kind of I get like like JoJo the circus boy from time to time when I'm around things that I'm enjoying, and I just kind of get into a zone, and I got a little mesmerized just listening to you talk about the philosophies and the maturation that goes into from barrel to glass. So I super appreciate you explaining some of that, and I don't even think we really scratched the surface of what happens in the woods. So I think we could probably do more another time if you were willing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Well, if I tell you everything all at one time, you would never have me on again. So, I got to leave something.
Well, like I said, I've been taking notes through this thing just so I have more questions to ask you next time. It was like a tornado in my head of just like, stay quiet, let her talk. She'll say it in a minute. Cause I was nerding out a little bit on you.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. And thanks for being so kind to have me on the show. And hope people try Michters, or if you're already a Michters fan, thank you so much. And thanks to all of our bar and restaurant personnel who are trying to keep it together during this time. And we appreciate every one of you all. And thank you so much for supporting us. And look us up if you're ever in Louisville. We have a great place to visit here, and we have a beautiful bar at Fort Nelson, and our visitor experience, sadly, it's closed at the moment, but hopefully with the vaccines and everything, hopefully we're on the way back.
Yep. I'm sure you'll be open again in no time.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Totally. Well, before I let you go, there's always one question. I just realized we can't leave without me asking you the question that everybody answers. If the last question, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of whiskey?
So you actually gave this question to me in advance, so I had time to think about it in full transparency. And honestly, I am so super passionate about our consumers and the people in the bar and restaurant trade who have supported us. I think for me, it would have to be something or someone that represents the collective of our consumer base, because to be genuine about it, I couldn't pick somebody, because there's so many people. I mean, our jobs depend on this. Our jobs depend on people liking our whiskey and bartenders supporting us, and people like yourself, having me on a show today just to kind of talk about Michters and tell our story. That would be who I would want to represent, in that space. So.
Beautiful answer, and I love the sentiment behind that.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed you allowing me to geek out with you over whiskey.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Call again anytime.
Oh, you know I will.
Please let me know.
I totally will. Have a great day.
All right. Cheers now.
Cheers. All right, everybody. That was a lot of fun, right? I told you she was going to be a good time. She was so freaking smart. I just can't wrap my head. I want to have her back. I want to have her back on. I want to talk more about what happens to the bourbon when it hits the barrel. She's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to bourbon and whiskey making. So we want to thank Andrea for being on the show. We want to thank Michters for coming in and letting her be on the show. They've been so wonderful to work with. She's been so wonderful to work with. We really hope you guys enjoyed the episode, as I had a blast talking to her. So you guys come on back next week. We've got more Bourbon Showdown podcast. We got some surprises this season. We're going to have Nick Offerman on the show. That's right, Parks and Rec Nick Offerman. We're also going to have Jackie Zykan from Old Forester. We've got Eddie Belfour from Hockey and Whiskey. It's just, I can't get over all of the cool people we've got coming on in the next few weeks. So keep on coming back to the Bourbon Showdown, and we'll keep putting that goodness out there for you to enjoy. My name is Jesse Jones. Let's raise a glass and kick some ass. I'll see you guys on down the road. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.